I was halfway through a late-night design sprint when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another Slack ping or a reminder about a deadline I'd already missed. Instead, it was a message from my mother. "You coming home this year?" I stared at it for a second, unsure if it was real. Then another one came in. "It would mean a lot to your dad and me." And finally, the one that did it. "The holidays just aren't the same without you." I froze. For a moment, the clatter of my noisy Chicago apartment faded. The cold air coming in from the cracked window, the hum of my ancient radiator, it all blurred. I read the words over and over again, as if by doing so they'd somehow change. But they didn't. And that was what broke me. It was the kind of message I used to write to myself in journals when I was 13 and feeling invisible. I'd imagine my mum saying it with tears in her eyes, hugging me like I mattered. But in reality, I was the daughter who grew up in the shadow of a golden retriever named Bentley. Yes, the dog. Bentley had his own birthday party every year. I got text messages, sometimes. But this message felt different. Warm. Real. Almost human. Work had been brutal. My team was understaffed, and I'd been operating on fumes, living off vending machine coffee and 3 hours of sleep a night. My boss had warned me not to take time off, not now, not with the product launch looming. But for once, I didn't care. They asked for me, they missed me, I said yes. It took almost a week to untangle myself from work. Shuffling meetings, rescheduling client presentations, begging my project manager to cover for me. I had to assure her 10 different ways that I'd still be available if absolutely needed. But I cleared 5 whole days. 5 days I hadn't taken for myself in over 2 years. I bought a flight. I even wrapped up a few little presents. Nothing big, just things that made me think of them. My dad's favourite tea blend, a new leash for Bentley, a copy of that weird Scandinavian mystery novel my mum kept talking about on Facebook. I pictured us sipping hot cocoa, watching terrible Hallmark movies, maybe even laughing again like we used to before everything got so cold. The day of my flight, I wore the scarf my grandmother knit me before she passed. I hadn't been back to my parents' house in nearly 3 years. Last time I visited, they'd left halfway through dinner to take Bentley to a grooming appointment. I figured it would be different this time. They asked for me. The flight from O'Hare was delayed twice and turbulent the whole way. My seatmate ate something that smelled like microwaved eggs and old socks, but I didn't care. My chest was full of this dumb, reckless hope that maybe this time would be different, that I wasn't going to be an afterthought. Not this time. I stepped out of the Uber with my suitcase in one hand and a soft smile on my face. The house looked exactly the same. White siding, big bay windows, twinkling icicle lights hanging just a little too uneven. But then I saw the trunk of my dad's car open and 3 giant suitcases being shoved into it. I paused. Maybe they were surprising me. Maybe we were all going on a trip together. Maybe they had rented a cabin and this was all part of a warm, magical holiday plan. My mum spotted me and waved. "There she is, just in time," she called out with the kind of cheer that felt like a slap. I laughed nervously. "Just in time for what?" "The cruise," she said like it was obvious. "We didn't want to leave Bentley alone, so we're glad you made it." My dad was tying down the trunk. "Just a quick getaway," he added. Josh, my younger brother, grinned at me from the passenger seat. "You'll be fine. You like quiet, remember?" Like I was a blender or a rice cooker, a household item that functioned better in silence. I stood there frozen on the sidewalk, suitcase still in hand, as my mum handed me a paper. It was folded neatly and titled in cursive, "Bentley's Holiday Routine." They drove off while I stood on the porch, heart pounding, watching the car disappear around the corner. And just like that, the message I'd been waiting for my whole life turned into a job description. The silence after they drove away was louder than the barking. Bentley stared at me from behind the glass door, his big eyes blinking like he couldn't quite figure out who I was. I forced a smile, wheeled my suitcase up the walkway and let myself in. The house still smelled like cinnamon and cedarwood diffuser oil, like it was trying a little too hard to feel festive. I stood there for a few seconds, holding the holiday routine sheet in one hand and my crushed expectations in the other. The paper was ridiculously detailed. 7:00 AM, walk Bentley for exactly 32 minutes, he prefers the lake trail. 7:45 AM, 2 scoops of duck and sweet potato kibble, warmed for 18 seconds in microwave. Noon, play with his puzzle toy, he gets bored if it's the green one. On and on it went, like I was being handed a sacred scroll instead of a schedule. At the bottom, in her handwriting, my mother had written, "Please take this seriously. Bentley gets anxious when things change." I couldn't help but laugh. Not a real laugh, more like the sound that leaks out when you're trying not to cry and failing. I walked into the living room. Nothing had changed. Same old furniture, same framed photos. Except for one subtle detail. The family photo on the mantel had been updated. A new shot from last summer, taken without me. Mum, Dad, Josh, and Bentley. My face, apparently, didn't make the cut this time. "Of course," I whispered. I dragged my suitcase upstairs toward my old room, eager to unpack and find some comfort in familiar things. But when I opened the door, I stopped cold. The room had been transformed. My bed was gone. In its place was a treadmill, a set of weights, and yoga mats rolled up in the corner. One wall was lined with resistance bands and positive mindset posters. My bookshelf was empty, my childhood desk replaced with a standing workstation. It wasn't just repurposed, it was erased. I turned around. My mum stood in the hallway, towel over her shoulder. "Oh, honey, yeah, your dad needed the space. You know, for his back. He's really into that Peloton app now. I meant to text you." I nodded slowly, even as something sharp twisted in my chest. "Where should I sleep?" She didn't miss a beat. "The pull-out couch is still in the living room, super comfy. We got a memory foam topper for Bentley, but I think it's still in the closet. You can use that if you want." That night, I lay curled on the sofa, wrapped in a fleece blanket that smelled faintly like dog. Bentley snored beside me, legs twitching like he was dreaming of chasing something. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake. Outside, the neighborhood glowed with fairy lights and blow-up Santas waving at no one. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No hot cocoa, no board games, just the sound of my own thoughts asking me over and over, why did I come back? Somewhere around 2 AM, I got up to grab some water and found myself standing in the hallway near the office. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and saw that most of my childhood things had been shoved into plastic storage bins, stacked carelessly in the corner. I pulled one open and found my old notebooks, yearbooks, and a sealed envelope with my handwriting on it. I recognized it instantly. A letter I'd written when I was 16. It had "Please read" scrawled on the front in red pen. I'd written it after a horrible week at school, relentless bullying, crying in the bathroom, hiding in the library at lunch. I hadn't known how to talk about it, so I wrote, poured my heart out, left it on the kitchen table one morning and waited. But no one ever mentioned it. I thought maybe they'd read it and just didn't care. Now I knew the truth. The envelope was unopened. I sank to the floor, letter in hand, heart pounding in my ears. 17 words scratched across the paper, desperate, young, hopeful, never even seen. I sat there for a long time, staring at it like it might dissolve. Bentley padded into the room, tail wagging, completely oblivious to the quiet implosion happening in the corner. I scratched behind his ears. "You've always been the favourite," I whispered. He licked my hand. The next morning, I woke up to Bentley standing on my chest, panting and wagging his tail like it was the best day of his life. It was 6:42 AM, 8 minutes before his scheduled walk, apparently. I groaned, shoved off the blanket, and forced myself upright. The living room was cold and dim. My back ached from the awful pull-out couch, and the memory foam topper had done exactly nothing. I fed Bentley, took him on the prescribed 32-minute walk around the lake trail, then stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, staring at the fridge. It was covered in photos. Family barbecues, Christmas mornings, Josh's graduation. My face was in exactly 2 of them, both from over 5 years ago. I opened the fridge and sighed. Despite the festive exterior, it was basically empty. Some old salad dressing, dog-friendly whipped cream, and a half-filled bottle of wine labelled "Do not drink for New Year's only." The pantry was no better. I eventually settled for a protein bar I found in my suitcase and chewed it slowly while Bentley chased a rubber chicken around the living room. Later that afternoon, I decided to dig through my storage bins again, needing something, anything, that felt like mine. I unearthed a few old sketchbooks, a dusty shoebox of Polaroids, and a small photo album I'd made for my mum one Mother's Day. Inside were pictures of us baking together, my hand in hers as she taught me how to frost cookies, me riding my bike for the first time while she cheered from the sidewalk. It ended with a note I'd written in Sharpie across the back cover. "Thank you for being my safe place." The pages were stuck together. She hadn't opened it in years. I put it back in the bin, closed the lid, and sat in silence for a long while. The house was too quiet again. I could hear the faint tick of the antique wall clock and the occasional whir of the HVAC kicking in. Everything felt too still, too sterile, like I'd walked into a museum of someone else's life. Out of boredom or masochism, I couldn't tell which, I wandered upstairs again and peeked into Josh's room. It looked untouched. Posters still on the walls, a trophy shelf perfectly dusted, his old electric guitar mounted like a shrine. The air even smelled like his awful cologne from high school. But it was my room that had been gutted. That contrast sat heavy in my chest. I went back downstairs, grabbing a notepad from the kitchen drawer, the same drawer I used to slip crayon drawings into for my mum when I was little. At the bottom, under a pile of coupons and expired grocery lists, I found something that made my breath catch. An envelope, crisp white, addressed to someone named Carol. The return address read, Homes and Hearth Realty. I opened it and immediately recognized the document type, Real Estate Purchase Agreement. My parents were in the process of selling the house. I flipped through the pages with shaking hands. Offer pending. Buyers scheduled to tour again after the new year. Move-out date listed as February 15th. No mention of me. No heads up. No conversation. The place I had cried in, laughed in, begged to be seen in, was about to be gone, and they hadn't even told me. Bentley came trotting in, barking at something out the window, probably a squirrel. I stared down at him, my stomach twisting. "This house was mine too, you know," I whispered. He tilted his head. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark on the couch, watching headlights flicker across the ceiling from passing cars. Every memory started replaying on a loop. Birthday parties where I was handed gifts labelled, "To Maria, Love Mom and Bentley." Times I asked to talk about college applications, only to be told we're busy taking Bentley to his therapy dog evaluation. The time I came home crying from my first job, unsure if I belonged anywhere, and my dad turned up the TV volume instead of asking why. I used to think if I just did more, called more, gave more, became more, they'd see me. Maybe they just didn't know how to love the version of me that wasn't convenient. But now it was clear. I was never the plan. I was the filler, the afterthought, the backup caregiver. Even my old room wasn't mine anymore. Even my childhood letter hadn't been worth opening. Even the house I grew up in was being sold without a second of consideration. Bentley hopped up onto the couch beside me again, curling up with a happy sigh. I looked down at him. "You win," I muttered, not even sure if I was joking. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry, without hiding it. It was 2 days before Christmas when I ran into Florence. She was my parents' next-door neighbour, somewhere in her 80s now, but still sharp as a tack and a better baker than anyone in the zip code. She was sweeping her porch in a Christmas sweater with a snowman that lit up and blinked like it had a mind of its own. "Maria!" she called, squinting into the winter sun. "Oh, sweet girl, come here, let me get a look at you." I hadn't seen her since I was maybe 22. She used to sneak me sugar cookies when Mum insisted I was watching my figure. I gave her a weak smile and walked over, pulling my coat tighter. Her hug smelled like vanilla and rosewater, and for a split second, I felt like a little kid again. "I thought you weren't coming this year," she said cheerfully. "Your mum told me you were too busy with work to visit." I blinked. She said, "What?" Florence chuckled, waving her hand like it was nothing. "Oh, I understand. Young people have so much going on these days. But it's good you made it. Your parents seemed real surprised when you showed up." I smiled politely, heart dropping into my stomach. So that was the game. Not only was I not invited to any real celebration, but they had told people I wasn't coming at all. The warm, emotional messages? Just bait to get a free dog sitter without upsetting the neighbours. "You staying long?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Just until they get back from their cruise," I said, and immediately hated how that sounded. Her eyes widened. "Cruise? I thought your father said they were just taking Bentley to a retreat." "Retreat, right." Florence invited me in for tea, and I accepted mostly because I didn't want to go back to the house that no longer felt like mine. Her place was cosy and smelled like cinnamon and old books. We sat on her floral couch, sipping tea from mismatched mugs, while she told me stories about her late husband and how her daughter was flying in from Oregon with the grandkids. I smiled and nodded and pretended not to ache inside. At one point, she said, "You know, I always thought you got the short end of the stick over there. Your mama never quite knew what to do with a girl who thought for herself." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She patted my hand gently and changed the subject, but her words stayed with me all the way home. When I walked back into the house, Bentley greeted me like I'd been gone a year. I bent down to pet him, then wandered into the kitchen for water. That's when I noticed a folder on the counter, probably left out by mistake. I opened it, thinking maybe it was cruise information I could ignore, but instead, it was something worse. It was an updated real estate listing for the house, not just a draft. An actual agreement with a buyer's name on it, Carol and Stephen something. Attached was a note from the realtor, pending final walkthrough, assume vacant by Feb 15th. I scanned the document, my hands shaking. The price, the dates, the fact that the entire home, the only place I'd ever been able to say I came from, was being sold off, and no one had bothered to mention it. Not even in passing, not even as a casual dinner topic. If Florence hadn't said anything, I might have flown home in January and found someone else living here. And just like that, I wasn't just a ghost in my own family. I was being erased entirely. I stumbled into the living room, still holding the paperwork, and collapsed onto the couch. Bentley jumped up beside me, licking my face, oblivious to the meltdown happening inches away. I should have seen it coming. The empty fridge, the stripped bedroom, the unopened letter, the slow, methodical removal of all things Maria. I was being archived like an old file no one had use for anymore. I reached for the wine bottle they'd marked "Do Not Open," unscrewed the cap, and took a long swig. Later that evening, while pretending to watch a dog grooming Christmas special on TV, I wandered over to the office again. My eyes scanned the built-in bookshelf, now filled with books on entrepreneurship and living a distraction-free life. In the back corner, I found a dusty shoebox labelled "Old Papers." I opened it, hoping to find something that would feel like home. Inside was a stack of cards, birthday ones from relatives, graduation announcements from Josh's friends, and near the bottom, a familiar envelope. Heavy, cream-coloured, my name on the front. I pulled it out. It was unopened. Again. This time it was a letter I'd written at 21. A note I'd left when I moved to Chicago. I had poured my heart into that one. thanking them for raising me, telling them I knew I hadn't always been easy, but that I loved them and hoped one day we could really talk. Really talk. They had never read it. It sat there for 8 years, unopened. I leaned back in the chair, the letter trembling in my hands, my throat tight. In the kitchen, Bentley let out a playful bark. The dog was more important. The cruise was more important. The house sale was more important. I was nothing but a placeholder. And placeholders get replaced. By the 4th day, the house no longer felt like a cold reminder. It felt like an insult. I had tried to stay composed, tried to convince myself it didn't matter, that I was an adult now and above this kind of pain. But I wasn't. I was just quieter about it than I used to be. That evening, while Bentley snored on the couch and the lights from the neighbour's inflatable Santa flickered against the window, I poured a glass of wine, against strict instructions, and curled up with my phone. I opened Facebook. I don't even know why. I rarely used it anymore, but something told me to look. Maybe it was a desire to feel connected, or maybe it was just a bad idea waiting to happen. Either way, I tapped into my dad's profile, half curious if he'd posted any beach selfies or dog-sitting shout-outs. What I found wasn't photos or cruise updates. It was worse. He'd posted a status the day after they left. It read, "So grateful for a peaceful holiday retreat with the ones who matter most. Life's too short to beg for the attention of people who never cared. Some children grow up, move away, and forget what family even means. That's fine. Let them go." Underneath, a dozen friends had commented, "Stay strong. You and Susan deserve better. Some kids are just selfish." I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. I reread it and reread it again. And every time, the words cut deeper. Let them go. That wasn't a general statement. That was aimed at me who was currently watching their damn dog, sleeping on their awful couch, drinking their leftover boxed wine and eating Ritz crackers for dinner. Me who had paid my father's health insurance for the last 2 years after his early retirement when Mum's craft business flopped. Me who had picked up the pieces every time Josh flaked out, every time Bentley needed emergency care and no one else could drive them, and this was how they framed me. As someone who never cared. I checked my name. He hadn't tagged me. Of course not. That would have required honesty. He wanted pity, not truth. I scrolled down. Another post. From Mum this time. A photo of Bentley in a Santa hat with the caption, "Missing our fur baby already. Grateful for family who step up even when others let you down." A jab. A precision-guided strike wrapped in holiday cheer. I dropped the phone into my lap, my hands shaking. For a long moment, I just sat there in the dark, the glow of the Christmas tree lights flickering across the carpet. I couldn't breathe. My eyes burned, but the tears didn't come. I was past tears. Past shock. I was angry, and under that anger there was something colder, calculating. I got up, walked over to the drawer where my mum kept her important folders. The same drawer where I found the real estate listing. I flipped through documents until I saw the logo I recognized. My bank. Specifically, a Chase Platinum Visa. I froze. I'd gotten that card years ago, back when I was still helping them out with groceries and car repairs, and my dad insisted it would be easier to share one account for emergencies. I'd forgotten all about it. But there it was. A receipt with my name tied to a payment. $5,000, 0 cents, for Royal Ocean Cruises. I stared at the number, then looked at the calendar on the wall with a red heart drawn over December 24th. Bon voyage. They hadn't just used me emotionally. They'd used me financially. I opened my laptop and logged into the Chase portal. Password still the same. I pulled up the statement. They'd used my card for 3 dinners, a suite upgrade, airport valet service. My heart pounded. I reached for my phone, found the cruise hotline and hit call. "Hi, yes," I said when the rep answered. "I need to cancel a reservation. It was made on my card without my authorization." The woman asked for details. I gave her everything. After a pause, she said, "We can cancel the remaining trip and refund the unused nights, since it's still within policy. Would you like to proceed?" "Yes," I said, voice like steel. "Please proceed." I hung up and sat back, the silence in the house now buzzing with adrenaline. Bentley whined from the living room, sensing something was different. "Don't look at me like that," I muttered. "You're still getting your salmon bites, but your spa vacation, cancelled." I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, pulled out their cruise itinerary and ran it through the shredder. Then I took out the velvet folder with the real estate documents and tucked a sticky note on the front. "Don't worry, Carol and Stephen will love this house, but you'll need a new down payment." The next morning I woke up with clarity. It didn't feel like rage anymore. It felt like purpose. A quiet, icy purpose that hummed beneath my skin like electricity. I moved with intention, making coffee not out of habit, but as if it were the opening act of a larger performance. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront. No, this time I was going to let silence do the talking. I started with the house. I went room by room, stripping every trace of myself from the walls, shelves, and drawers. The few photos of me still clinging to life on the fridge, I took them down. That old childhood drawing tucked behind the pantry door, gone. The last few boxes with my name sharpied on the side, packed into the trunk of my car. It was like clearing out a museum exhibit that no one ever really visited. And when the house was finally scrubbed clean of me, I turned to the main act. I opened their closet and pulled out the suitcase they'd left behind. Just one, probably for extra gifts they planned to buy on the ship. I opened it and began filling it, not with clothes, but with reminders. I placed the shredded cruise itinerary inside first, then the Bentley holiday routine printout, now crumpled and stained with wine. Next, the real estate listing with my note still attached. Finally, I printed out screenshots of both Facebook posts. Dad's sanctimonious rant, Mum's passive-aggressive gratefulness, each one carefully labelled, slipped into sheet protectors like evidence in a courtroom. I zipped the suitcase shut and left it by the front door. Bentley, ever loyal, followed me around the house with a whine in his throat. He didn't understand why the lights were off, why the treats stopped coming, why the routine had broken. I kneeled down and held his face in my hands. "You didn't ask for this," I whispered, "but I'm not staying where I'm not wanted. Not even for you." He tilted his head, then licked my cheek. I gathered the rest of my things and paused only once in the centre of the living room, where the Christmas tree still blinked like nothing had changed. I clicked on the remote, turning off every last light. Then I pulled out my phone and hit record. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't revenge porn. It was closure. "Hi, Mum, Dad. If you're watching this, you're probably back from the cruise that never finished. Maybe you're confused, maybe you're angry, but if you're surprised, that's on you." I paused, glancing at the camera. My voice didn't shake. "I came home because I thought, maybe, just maybe, you wanted me here, not as a helper, not as a dog sitter, but as a daughter. That was my mistake. You didn't want me. You wanted someone to keep the illusion going, someone to hold the leash and turn on the lights and keep the Christmas tree plugged in so the house looked full while you emptied it of any real warmth." I stood up, angled the phone toward the now bare fridge. "You posted about gratitude, about peace, about family that steps up. Let me remind you, I was the one paying for your insurance, Dad. I was the one who took care of Bentley when you cancelled your vet visit for a weekend wine tasting. I was the one you used, literally, when you booked your luxury vacation on my credit card without asking." I turned the camera toward the suitcase by the door. I didn't cancel the cruise out of spite. I cancelled it because it was mine to cancel. You may think of me as disposable, but your bank account doesn't. Consider this my final contribution. I clicked off the video, uploaded it to a private Google Drive folder, and scheduled it to email automatically to both of them the moment my plane touched down in Chicago. I took one last look around. The air smelled like pine and betrayal. As I opened the front door, Bentley let out a soft whine behind me. I didn't look back. They got home 2 days later. I know because Josh texted me a single word. Seriously. I didn't respond. I was already back in my apartment in Chicago, curled up with a mug of tea and the kind of silence that felt like safety instead of punishment. Outside, snow was falling in slow, heavy flakes. Inside, my phone buzzed 3 times in a row before going quiet. Then came the email alert. My video had been viewed. Later, a friend who still followed my mum on Facebook sent me a screenshot. The holiday photos were gone. In their place, a blank profile picture and a status that simply read, "Taking a break from social media, please respect our privacy." A few nosy neighbours commented beneath it, "Hope everything's okay. You two are so strong." I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to. The silence was finally theirs to hold. But I imagine the scene when they walked through that door. The living room dim, the tree unplugged, Bentley sulking in the corner, disoriented, no Maria, no gifts. Just a single suitcase by the door, with all the evidence they thought no one had the nerve to speak aloud. I pictured Mum, flipping on the lights, calling my name with that faux sweet tone, and then Dad spotting the laptop open on the table with the email already waiting. "Hi Mum, Dad. If you're watching this, you're probably back from the cruise that never finished." I imagined their faces shifting, from confusion to discomfort to disbelief. My voice echoing through their perfectly staged living room like a ghost finally speaking up after years of haunting silently. I imagined Dad's mouth tightening when I brought up the insurance payments, the vet visits, the stolen credit card, and Mum frozen as I pointed out how she'd updated the family photo but left me out, how she'd taken me out of the frame long before I ever walked away. I didn't make the video to hurt them. I made it because for the first time in my life, they couldn't talk over me. They couldn't interrupt, deflect, roll their eyes, or offer some fake version of the past where everything was fine and I was just too sensitive. They had to hear it, all of it, and they had to sit with it. Josh sent another message later that night. That was cold. They were shocked. Mum cried. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Good." He didn't text again. The next day, I got a notification from my credit card app. Dad had attempted to use the card again at a gas station near the marina. Declined. I smiled. He'd forgotten I froze the account. 2 days later, an email from the realtor popped up in my inbox. I guess they forgot I was listed as a co-owner on the house, back when I helped them refinance 5 years ago and they needed my credit score to qualify. The sale was paused. Apparently they needed my signature to proceed. The email ended with, "Let us know how you'd like to move forward. Buyers are getting anxious." I didn't reply. Let them wait. Let Carol and Stephen wonder what happened to their lovely February move-in date. Let my parents sit in the house they tried to erase me from, surrounded by boxes they assumed I'd help them pack. I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Not after years of being told I was too much, too distant, too complicated. Not after being told to understand every time they chose Josh, or Bentley, or themselves. I thought about that unopened letter again, the one I wrote when I moved out at 21, the one where I apologized for everything, even the things I shouldn't have, the one where I begged for peace. They never read it, and that was all I needed to know. They only saw me when they needed something. Now they would see what it felt like to not be seen at all. Christmas morning in Chicago was quiet in the best way. No barking, no passive-aggressive notes, no phone calls masked as guilt trips. Just a soft snowfall outside my window and the comforting hum of the radiator. I wrapped myself in my thickest sweater, brewed a real cup of coffee, none of that watered-down stuff from the suburbs, and sat by the window with a blanket over my knees. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I wasn't waiting for a text. I wasn't checking my email for an apology that would never come. I wasn't pretending. I was just here, with myself, and that was enough. Around noon, my best friend Natalie dropped by, carrying a bag of bagels and wearing fuzzy reindeer antlers that clashed wildly with her red lipstick. She took one look at me, no makeup, hair in a bun, and grinned. "You look like someone who just kicked the ghost of Christmas past in the face." I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from deep in your chest when your body remembers what joy feels like. We spent the afternoon watching terrible Christmas rom-coms, doing a puzzle we'd never finish, and drinking mimosas out of mismatched mugs. At one point, Natalie looked over and said, "You know what? You're glowing." I snorted. "It's probably the champagne." "No," she said, suddenly serious. "It's peace. You've got peace in your face for the first time since, forever." I didn't answer. I just looked at the lights on the tree she helped me decorate last weekend. It was a weird little tree. Half the ornaments were handmade disasters from our college years, and the star on top leaned dramatically to the left. But it was mine. No one had assigned me a role, no one expected me to perform. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Later, when she left, she hugged me at the door and whispered, "I'm proud of you. I know that was hard." And it was. Walking away from family doesn't come with clean edges. There's always that part of you that wonders if you overreacted, if you burned a bridge you'll someday wish was still standing. But then I remember all the times I stood on that bridge alone, screaming for someone to walk toward me, and they never did. Sometimes survival means building your own bridge and walking it by yourself. I spent the rest of the evening writing. Not angry letters, not explanations, just small thoughts, reflections. I wrote about what I'd learned, about how silence can be louder than yelling, about how love without respect is just control, about how letting go is sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself. I didn't make a New Year's resolution. I didn't need one. I just made a promise. No more shrinking. No more showing up where I'm not seen. No more dimming myself to make others comfortable. The next morning, I donated the last box of old holiday decorations I'd brought back from my parents' place. Kept a few childhood ornaments, but the rest? Gone, like the version of me who kept waiting for something that would never come. 1 week later, a letter arrived. From my mother, handwritten. The envelope had my name in her familiar cursive, the same way she used to label my lunchboxes. For a moment, my heart twisted. Maybe this was it, the moment every wounded kid dreams of. An apology, a reckoning, an acknowledgement. But when I opened it, I found a single sentence. "We didn't deserve that video, Mariah." That was it. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "We didn't know." Not even, "I love you." Just a refusal to take responsibility, wrapped in elegant penmanship. I folded it once, twice, then dropped it in the trash. Because healing isn't waiting for someone to say what you need to hear. Healing is learning to live beautifully, even if they never say it. I poured myself another cup of coffee, sat by the window and watched the snow fall. No chaos, no noise, just me. And for the first time in my life, that felt like everything.